As an academic with a commitment and a passion for development broadly understood, economic transformation, social change, economic growth, social justice, those kinds of pedagogical concerns inevitably assist in focusing your mind on imagining a future. Now, my own discipline is economic history, which is a hybrid discipline that speaks to historical trends and patterns, that seeks to explain what are the potentials for transformation and what are the inhibiting forces and factors within the ecosystems. And at the same time, to look at global projections and to see where your region is participating in those global changes. So my discipline inevitably drives me into a space where I'm always trying to imagine, not only imagine a future, but to imagine the steps and the processes needed to actualize that future. So I would say that in terms of my institutional leadership, a significant part of my time is spent living in a world that does not yet exist. And so on the basis of that imagining and having responsibility for strategic planning, then planning and imagining, they go together to create a very dangerous cocktail, which is future thinking. Again, as an institutional leader in the context of a region that is struggling to attain the levels of economic growth and transformation citizens expect, you have to realize, I think, the relationship between two important issues. One, as a university leader in this environment, the university has to thrive. It has to be sustainable. It has to, in and of itself, it has to reinvent itself. It has to energize itself, and it has to be a part of whatever goes on in the future. On the other hand, fine universities are not created to serve themselves. We are a public university, and we are here to serve the Caribbean public. So the resources that are given to us with an objective in mind, which is the advancement and elevation of the citizens and the society. And therefore, as a leader of the institution, I have to ensure that the university is doing the best it can to deliver those public objectives. So we're caught in a circumstance where we have to enhance the institution's reputation and standing. It has to serve specific national, regional objectives, and at the same time, it has to survive and strengthen itself. So any strategic planning process has to take those two fundamental discourses and merge them into a common narrative. The institution must survive, it must thrive. The institution must be seen to be actively promoting public objectives and to actualize those objectives. The current strategic plan of the university, therefore, the 5-year plan 2017-2022, was conceptualized in that spirit. It is at once an attempt to participate in a theory of economic growth, to participate in a strategy for economic transformation, while simultaneously strengthening the institution internally to survive into the future. We call it the AAA strategy because it is built upon 3 fundamental pillars: access, alignment, agility. If you take those 3 pillars, and my conceptualization of this strategic plan, it was my judgment that these are areas where the university can demonstrate its relevance and its pertinence, but at the same time, these are the areas that are necessary for economic transformation and growth. So, merging them to create a plan that says, what is holding back this region in terms of its potential at the moment is access to quality higher education, professional training, and skills development. So, I do not believe, in my own way, as half of an economist, that what is holding back this region is not a shortage of capital. It is a shortage of the critical skills in the critical areas that are necessary to drive innovation. So we do have a shortage of those critical skills in those important new economic areas. We do need to ramp up our skills development because our technical skill sets are not as comprehensive as they should be and as diversified as they should be. And at the same time, the number of our young people who are participating in higher education is far too small. In fact, it is the lowest in the hemisphere in the context of the age cohort 18 to 30. And this is problematical because most economic models will suggest that if you are not participating in higher education skills development somewhere in the 40, 50 and above range, you are going to have serious systemic problems. And those problems will manifest themselves also in the social area. And this is where we're at. So we have an access crisis, and that needs to be addressed. And the University of the West Indies, working in association with other colleges, institutes, and universities, the higher education sector is well positioned to deliver those sets of human resource developments, the social capital. So we need an access revolution, and that's why the first A. Then, because of our post-colonial history and some of the systemic challenges with entrepreneurship in this region, traditional hegemonic mercantile economic activity versus more innovative science-based entrepreneurship, we have a disconnect between the tertiary educational sector and the traditional private sector. And so that gap has inhibited the transfer of research and innovation out of the university environment into the places of wealth creation. And as you know, most of the countries that have achieved substantial rates of economic growth and transformation, including the older countries, and the old and first and second industrial revolutions, the old countries, they built that process upon a very close alignment between the educational system at the higher level and innovation, new generations of private entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship reinventing itself over time in new and innovative areas, but driven largely by people who have had access to formal training, professional skills, and even liberal arts education that would help to imagine transformation into new forms of activity. So alignment is a very important part of our strategy, and it is fundamentally necessary at this historic juncture that we give credence to the energy required to move research into areas where it can impact commercialization, commodification, basically to build bridges between academia and industry. And the third pillar is agility, which speaks to the need for focus, accurate reading of environments, both domestic and international, and taking advantage of opportunities that are being created in this new fourth industrial revolution. I gave a speech recently in which I argued that the Caribbean world is still recovering from the adverse effects of the first industrial revolution, in which this region was invented as a place of extraction. And our economies were built on this principle of external extraction of value and of wealth and leaving this region with absolutely chronic systems in respect of industrial development and so on. And of course, it was part of an empire, and therefore the policy of empire was precisely that: no manufacturing, nothing beyond the primary extraction. So that is our legacy here. The second industrial revolution deepened that process, and the third industrial revolution, built around commercial services, finance, banking. We made some headway in respect of the restructuring of our primary economies towards services, and we made some headway in tourism, financial services, and so on. So, but the fourth industrial revolution gives us now creative opportunities to, in a sense, transcend those legacies of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. And it puts us in a position to use our accumulated intellect to foster new forms of intervention. No one says there's a level playing field. There's never a level playing field. But at least on this playing field, with the use of the technologies and the information available and the shrinking global world, we can build partnerships and we can enter into that space through the adaptation of technologies. And so the university sector is in an excellent position not only to demonstrate global agility, but also to partner with institutions that are willing to be part of this new world. And so agility for us is vital for the university itself, but also critical for regional economic transformation. So I believe that our strategic plan is at once a plan to enhance the relevance of the university into the future, but at the same time it says here is a university that has its intellectual sleeves rolled up and is out there in the trenches fighting with the economic leaders, helping to strengthen old entrepreneurial groups, but at the same time to imagine that new entrepreneurial classes must evolve, using the technologies, using the science, using innovation. And so it widens and thickens the entrepreneurial class, whereas the traditional hegemonic groups that have focused on mercantile activity need not be placed at the center, but younger generations with a different view. So I believe, therefore, that our university strategic plan is very timely. I believe it is a demonstration of the fact that we are thinking not about ourselves, but we are thinking about the people of this region. There's no doubt that the world economy is being transformed in very fundamental ways that have given opportunities for countries and entrepreneurial leaders who are willing to embrace not only science and technology, but innovation in a wide span of areas, from cultural industries and the management of information and data, through to production and production systems, through to the stepping up of the value added in traditional industries that can do things in new and innovative ways. And at the same time, this is a moment, as I've said, where young people with some degree of formal training and an understanding of how global production and global services are being developed can innovate. And it is an economic world that allows for small creative entrepreneurs to find niches and to thicken the quantity and the quality of business life. Now, we have built economies historically largely on certain primary sectors where you have large entrepreneurial families and companies dominating national economies and so on. But I think what is taking place now is a beehive concept where everyone is busy as a bee making their little cell. And these little cells of economic activities, these little zones and ecosystems are mushrooming through an economy and infecting an economy with an energy level. And I think that the concept of the self-employed innovator taking a few people along, has become a force at the center of economic cultures, so that most of the major industries that we have seen transform in the last 20 years, this is how they all started, with incubators, with small groups of people taking ideas and playing with them and imagining new products and imagining how to take the small product into a wider world. So it's an exciting time for for young people, especially who have access to information and how to use information. And this is why the university and colleges and other tertiary institutions are so important, to show them how to have confidence in taking those first steps, and recognizing that first steps are more often than not fulfilling of the imagination, but how to be resilient and taking the second and the third step despite the challenges of the first step, and learning as you go. So it's about learning, and I believe that the very notion of the entrepreneur, the very concept, has been radically transformed. It has been individualized, democratized. It has been attached now to innovation. And I believe that this is the moment for universities to be in themselves entrepreneurial, so that institutions can now participate in this process. We have access to a prime asset, and that prime asset is research knowledge. And that research knowledge becomes the basis on which you can then commodify, commercialize, and grow. So individuals, institutions, the entire ecosystem of production, everyone now has to some extent access. And finally, the issue of science. There is no doubt that science is the basis of the transformation. But there are two kinds of science. What I will call the social science now having its true meaning, that if a community has a view about how best to do something, historically we will call that a cultural sensibility, but it is a social science because the community has developed through its own experience and development a scientific view about how to proceed into the future. Now then you have, of course, what we now call the technology sciences, where the technology sciences then take the social sciences and run with them, or vice versa. That if I say to you, in my community, this is how the people in the village have always thought through this, and there's an accumulation of knowledge, that is the science of society. That is the social science. A citizen in that community can then say, okay, well, there are certain theories about scientific behavior, the human mind and how it works, how nature operates. There are certain laws of nature that science has given us access. And we take that and apply it then to the social sciences, and then we have innovation. And I think that is really the exciting moment that we're in. There is a view that most important developments are accidental, but there's also the view that when the accident occurs, if you're not ready, it destroys you. And therefore, if you are prepared and you encounter the accident, then you might be able to respond and move forward. I had no intention whatsoever at any stage of my academic life in participating in management leadership, institutional leadership. I was socialized into a traditional intellectual tradition of the academic, involved in research, publishing, teaching, learning narrowly. And that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer, and that was my principal objective, because I discovered at a very, very early age that writing was something I enjoyed. I got tremendous pleasure from it. And then I got the benefits of certification. At a critical moment, my CEO the Vice Chancellor of the university at the time said, okay, Professor Beckles, you've had your fun. You had your fun, you've been out there doing research, writing books, you've had your fun, now come and contribute. And I was brought into the management of the institution, and then I discovered that the discipline in which I was trained and the passion and commitment I had as a child for the advancement of our people who have had a very difficult history. And we know that history of the African people and of the Caribbean people, all of us, we've had a very traumatic journey in the world. And the passion to contribute to elevation, to advancement, was always there. So it was really a matter of transferring a mindset, a philosophy, a highly developed kind of consciousness into management, and seeking to use an institution to fulfill its potential for the development of the society. I had a very strong view that the university that I lead is the university of the people, and that they must own it, feel close to it, and that they must wake up every day knowing that their university has their back. So that drove me forward, and then of course there's the issue of risk taking. Because I was never trained in management and did not come through a business school and understood the intricacies and the mysteries of the balance sheet, but at the same time having a clear macro perspective on growth, and recognizing that my center of gravity is the academic, I was able to take more risk, I think, because if things did not go right, I could always say, well, I wasn't trained. And if I made mistakes, well, I'm sorry, but I will do better. And that enabled me to take a tremendous amount of risk into imagining the future. And risk-taking oftentimes would entail going beyond the stakeholders' remit. And the stakeholders would have a remit, you know, steady as you go, steady as you go. And in an environment where resources are very scarce, and in a highly political environment, where the institution of learning is so close to the political narrative because of the sense that we have to micromanage our institutions, because for an institution to lose its way, the consequences and the collateral damage can be so great. So the environment itself, therefore, certainly does not place a premium on risk-taking. But at the same time, transformation requires risk-taking. And it requires a clear understanding of alternatives, of what a society will need even before the society realizes what those needs are. So reading tea leaves, reading future trends, and being as confident as a human being can be confident in a future trend, and taking the risk, I believe that that set of characteristics defined my institutional leadership. And I would say that, you know, no one can grade oneself, but I believe that we are moving forward, and I believe that the institution under my watch has built upon the traditions and the legacies of former leaders. And so I say to myself each day, would my predecessors, looking at my moment, would they say that I'm building up on their shoulders? Or would they say that I'm diminishing them? And one of the ways to answer that question is to be in close engagement with those leaders, build relationships with them, stay close to how they had imagined, and attach your own thinking to their thinking, so that you can see where to consolidate, where to take risk. So I believe then that at the end of the process, even though you might be a critical thinker and an innovator, the truth of the matter is you are really so attached to the values and views and the traditions of your predecessors that you really are just a marginal enhancer rather than a strategic leader. This is a moment in our region that requires confidence and courage. The impact of this 2007-2008 global financial recession came quickly on the heels of the prior recession, and in a sense for us in this sub-region, we've had about 25, 30 years of it. And it has had the impact of generating a fair amount of doubt and excess conservatism in the region. And this is understandable. This region has suffered pain, a lot of it generated by forces outside of the region in which we were rocked to the core. And that added to the long history has created an environment that can easily lead to doubt and diminished self-belief. But at the same time, the younger generations are very passionate and energetic about the transformation of the Caribbean into a space that they want to have. They are moving around the region. They are owning things. I mean, if you consider Trinidad Calypso music is owned by the Caribbean. Jamaica reggae music is owned by the Caribbean. The younger people are owning the space in new and creative ways. They are traveling, they are forming bonds and relationships across the region. They are very mobile for cultural and other activities. And the institutions themselves are promoting this. So I believe that all we need to do is to have confidence in the collective capacity of the region. If you take, for example, what has happened in the musical world of late, where we had a great star who fell upon a difficult moment and paid his price in the criminal justice system. Coming out of that, the region rallied around his artistic and creative ability and imagination. And he was given a welcome across this region that was absolutely phenomenal, because there's a belief that this is a Caribbean asset that we must protect. And the potential for transforming that into entrepreneurship and regional development vital. So I think the entrepreneurial class at the moment needs to have more confidence. They need to be more innovative. They need to recognize too that they're not going to get the credit for sticking to old traditional patterns of activity. They might survive, but they're not going to get the respect in this world. No one is going to see them as significant entrepreneurs simply by doing things in the old ways because it has worked in the old economy. The kudos and the credit that will be given to those who innovate, those who transform, those who take risks, those who change the ecosystem, those who are prepared to diversify product development, convert ideas into production, go beyond the Caribbean in search of markets, go global. These are the people who are going to get the respect and the courage. So reputation, I know, is always very important for entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs like to be respected for what they have done. They like to be celebrated for their risk taking and for their success. And so I believe that if reputation and status, in addition to net revenue, if those things are going to drive the thirst and the hunger, I believe that we are on our way.